You don't think, Paul, that all your formative years, your role with the Anti-Discrimination Board were all, in a sense, even though you weren't to know it in those years, necessary stepping stones to where you eventually ended up, in a sense, coming up with some what were then seen as quite novel approaches to enunciating, for example, the precautionary principle?
I don't know really. I've never reflected upon it, so it's very difficult for me to say, but I certainly gained a lot from each opportunity, being at the bar, being at the Anti-Discrimination Board, working for various committees, and then being at the Land and Environment Court and then the Court of Appeal. I certainly learned from each experience, and they must have all contributed, but as I said, I've never really reflected upon it.
The Australian Conservation Foundation has a slogan, "There is no planet B." Now, your interesting challenge in all of this, you mentioned right at the beginning of the interview that you'd wanted to be an architect. Architects are all about crafting practical solutions to problems. Did you see yourself in a way as being an architect of that, taking that statement into account, an architect of the steps that lead towards, well, all right then, that is the reality, we must do something about it, but here's how we bring everyone with us?
Well, I don't know, maybe there's something in that. I've always tried to find some practical solution to a particular problem or issue. And I know that you sometimes come to those sorts of solutions that don't satisfy anybody because they involve an element of compromise. But often it's the best thing to do. Having said that, though, I think that there is one point I'd like to make, and that is this, that in development today, there seems to be a view around that the answer should never be no, that no development is bad enough to be refused, that all development, provided it's moulded enough, provided it's severely conditioned, ought to be approved subject to those stringent conditions. I don't happen to agree with that, and I think that there are some developments where the answer should be a flat no, and people should go back to the drawing boards.
Do you think underlying that view of theirs is that we are generating growth for the economy, we are creating money, we are doing something? It's their notion of what a contribution to an economy is.
Well, it is about this notion of growth, and I must say that over the past 10 years or so, I've become of the view that growth for growth's sake is a very silly thing to do.
Yes, no, that's quite right, and it's just that it's a prevailing view that you still hear, isn't it? And I suppose it's going to take yet more time, unfortunately, maybe to change it.
Well, particularly today when growth is slowed to such an extent and people are getting worried about their economies, that people want to have more growth, but it depends on what sort of growth you have.
Do you think humankind will ever see sense?
I think we're a pretty silly lot on the whole, and I doubt whether we'll change a great deal over the next few decades.
So am I inferring from that you've become more pessimistic, or have you always had a reasonably, if you like, grain of salt, pinch of salt attitude to how humanity works in all your years of practice?
I think so. I've always been a bit of a pessimist, but not in extreme terms, and I guess I'm sort of a blend of some streams of optimism with some layer of pessimism below it. But I don't like the way we're going at the moment, I must say. I think that it's pretty poor in terms of environment in particular.
I suppose you must be pleased several of your decisions in those years were overturned in the Court of Appeal, but then the High Court later on recognised. That's right, yeah, a couple of them, yeah, that's right. But the fact is that in the end the High Court saw the rightness of what you were doing and upheld you again. So you must feel a little bit vindicated in certain situations.
Yes, but I don't think of terms of vindication. It never worried me if a decision was overturned on appeal. That's part of the system. That's what Court of Appeal are there to do, and I did that myself when I was there. And if it happens to be changed in the High Court, well, that's good. But, you know, it doesn't... it never worried me, as it worries some judges, about what happens in appellate courts. Some judges really worry about it, but I never used to.
You were appointed, and you mentioned this already, but eventually you were appointed as a judge of the New South Wales Supreme Court and then a judge of appeal, and that was between 1997 to 2005. So I suppose you had plenty of occasion to reflect on that and act in yet again a different role.
Yes, I really enjoyed the Court of Appeal. One of the things I really enjoyed about it was the collegiateness of the judges. I think that worked very well, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the work. But I think it also improved my work as a judge, in particular in writing judgments. I believe the judgments should come out relatively quickly, and I never sat on a judgment for very long in the Court of Appeal. I believed judgments should be succinct and only as long as they needed to be, and never longer. And I tried to stick to that religiously in the time on the Court of Appeal, but it was a very good intellectual test, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
You would have been a journalist's dream, coming up with succinct judgments. I mean, but there is a great deal of misunderstanding about what judges do in the broad community. So do you feel, in a sense, you were saying a moment ago about the importance of coming to judgments quickly and succinctly, do you think in a way, if more judges did that, we might not be suffering the degree of misapprehension that we do?
Well, I don't know the general community read Court of Appeal judgments very much. I think that I'd like to see legal studies be part of compulsory curriculum in high schools from a relatively early time, because I think it's important that everybody has the opportunity to know how the legal system works and what their part of it is and what the role of the various players is. And I think they'll have much greater understanding and respect for the law generally if they know more about it than they do today.
Do you think that's led to too much emphasis on people's rights and not enough on their responsibilities?
No, I don't think that necessarily. I think the responsibilities are as important as rights, and sometimes we hear clamour for rights with our life on advocating equal rights for people.